I recorded my presentation today at the conference, but that video did not come through correctly, so I'm going to re-record it for you. I'm sorry that the comments that everybody made during it will not be here in the presentation, but I'll try to remember to input them, and then hopefully they'll also be on the Jamboard that I'm going to talk about. So, welcome to Outreach with your public library. There is a QR code on this page right here that will take you to a Google Drive folder with this presentation, as well as a simplified PDF of a Word document that is just a basic outline of this without all the colors and all that jazz. It has all the exact same information. And if you're looking the presentation as a PDF, you can also just click on the QR code and it will take you right to the Google Drive folder. And if you have any trouble accessing the Google Drive folder, just email me. And here's my email and my information. Hello, I am Mary Eklund. I am currently a librarian at the Avalon Free Public Library. I'm the collection development librarian, and formerly I was of many different things, but most recently I was at the Cape May County Library. I was a children's librarian, and my specialty was outreach. I've also worked as a teen librarian for quite a few years. And just so you know, I have given other presentations like this, but on the flip side, with the public librarian side about working with school librarians, I gave those presentations at the NJASL Conference and the Youth Services Forum all this year. So your public librarians are likely thinking about this too. And if they are not and they didn't get to see those, then you can still refer them to that link that's right there in the bullet point. It's those presentations and the resources that I talked about in there. And there are examples of newsletters and emails I sent out and all that type of stuff in there. So if you want to share that with your public librarians, feel free. And also yesterday, Neil Grimes and Jessica Trujillo presented Power and Possibilities of Partnerships for Schools and Students. And you can click on the link right there to see information about their presentation. It's the website for, their page on the conference website. This is what we're going to be covering today. It's the outline of everything, how everything is set up. I'm not going to go through it point by point because you're about to experience it. And this is what we'll be discussing throughout. This is what was in the description for the program. And this isn't really how it's organized, but all this stuff is spread out throughout the whole presentation. So again, here is the Google Drive folder. You can go ahead and click on the QR code or use your phone to use the QR code. The Google Drive has information, has this presentation, has the outline of the presentation, has information about story walks and other stuff on there. And there's also a Jamboard on there. So you can post ideas, questions, and anything else on the Jamboard. It's located in the Google Drive folder and also available there where that link is. I'll respond to stuff throughout the week. The Jamboard will close on Sunday, this coming Sunday, 11/12/22. And 12/12/22. Oh man, I didn't notice that before, but it's 12/12/22. And I will post a PDF of the Jamboard on the Google Drive folder. So you'll still have all that information to use. And I'm recording this presentation and hopefully this video works out. So when that happens, I will be updating this presentation on the conference website. The one you're seeing right now is currently on there. I will be updating the conference website PDF, and I will be updating the presentation on the Google Drive folder, and that link will be an actual link to the video, which is a little bit meta, but it's fine. The link will be there. And now, disclaimer. Every library's staffing and resources will be different. These are all ideas. Talk to your public library to see what can work for you both. And of course, I am not here to tell you what you have to do and what you should be doing if you're a good librarian, because we all know that we're all doing a lot of stuff. Your public librarian's doing a lot of stuff. You're doing a lot of stuff. Don't stress. I'm just here to give you ideas and give you encouragement and to be an excellent vibe to help you not feel overwhelmed by all the things that you have to do. And I highly recommend contacting me if you're unsure of a next step or if something's not working out. All right, first I'm just going to give you a little bit of background information on Cape May County. I'm going to not linger on it. I could talk about Cape May County for frickin' ever, but I will not at this time. I'm just going to give you this. You can look at it in the presentation. The idea is that there is a huge range of humans in Cape May County. A lot of people consider it as a vacation resort. So it must be idyllic and perfect. And you know, we got our problems too. But we're also a great place in the summer. Generally, in summer, tourists generally outnumber locals 9-1. Sorry, I couldn't get that sentence out. The housing and overall cost of living is insane. A teeny tiny house is like $200,000. The housing market has gone completely bonkers. It's very hard to buy a house down here right now. And it's very difficult to afford housing at the best of times. And salaries are not very high in Cape May County, and a lot of people do not work year round. Or it's difficult to find a year-round job that pays well in general. And there's a huge income range on the islands. There's generally lots of second homes that people have. Oprah has a house down here, but then there's also the residents that are unemployed in the winter or unemployed year-round. So there's a huge range going on down here. And we're pretty remote. We only have like a couple major roads, and a lot of it is marsh and island. It takes like 45 minutes to an hour to get from the bottom to the top of Cape May County, and then going across is a half hour. So, especially in the summer when there's lots of people around. So, Cape May County Library. I'm doing all of this from the perspective of a Cape May County librarian. That's what I'm going to mostly be talking about, just because that's what most of my outreach experience is in. So, Cape May County Library has 8 branches plus a bookmobile. It started out as the 3 branches, the central one in Cape May Courthouse, and then the upper library and the lower library. And then we absorbed some more as time went on. And as you can tell, there are some branches that share youth services librarians, which is obviously not ideal. I'm sure a lot of you understand what it's like to be bouncing between buildings and how much it makes it so you can't really serve those communities entirely. So it doesn't work absolutely great. We have 7 youth services librarians total. 4 of them are at that main branch in the center, and we do at least have library vehicles to be driving around, but it's hard to provide outreach to the entire county when there's all these different school districts and everything. And when we have our librarians at the branches are trying to do the outreach for those branches, but it's difficult because they're not there all the time. And Cape May County Library does not include Avalon Free Library, which is where I am right now, the Ocean City Library, or the Shavit Library, which is in Strathmere, and it's a private library. The schools, 29 schools, so we have 7 people trying to do outreach with 29 schools, and most of that falls onto one person. Not me anymore, since I have moved on to another library, but one person trying to do it mostly for all of the schools. There's only 13 school librarians in those 29 schools, and 7 of the libraries are run by teachers who have a lot of confusion about basic library stuff just because they weren't trained on it. They're doing their best, but it's difficult. And at least 2 school librarian positions have not been refilled in the past 2 years. And so that tells us we can't assume anything about the school's organization, teachers' classes, or school librarians' needs, or anything. We don't know what's going on. You got to tell us. So what can your public library do for you? For educators, for all of your teachers and everything, we can do trainings. I know that you guys are also going to be doing lots of great trainings, but if we can take something off your plate, awesome. Our databases, our e-library, Libby, Hoopla, Canopy, all of that great stuff. This different softwares and makerspace items. The Cape May County Library has the Technology Learning Center, which is amazing. It's basically a gigantic makerspace. It's run by technology people rather than librarians, and they get to literally just focus in on the technology and the fun stuff like that. 3D printers take a lot of time, and your school having makerspace is great, but maybe it's just not a great fit for you to have to suddenly, or you or the technology teacher or somebody else to have to take care of all of these things on top of everything else that you're doing. So maybe you can buddy up with your public library also and provide a makerspace together. But anyway, sorry, the trainings. They can teach you 3D printer stuff. They can help you troubleshoot VR, drones, cricket, board games, Google Workspace, all that great stuff. Lots of trainings. General library information. You're sharing this stuff with them, I'm sure, but the public library also functions a little differently from the school library. So the public library, you could train your teachers on this, but why not have somebody else do it so that you have some more time for all the other stuff that you have to do, and informational freedom and all of that too. And also we can give the teachers and you database access. They're so expensive, and you can share the resources. We'll talk about doing library card drives. And if you record your students' library cards and make it normal for them to be constantly, to just have that number around, then they can get onto the databases. And your students can access their library databases at school with their library cards, like I said, sorry. Also, these ones that I have listed down here, I know that Team Book Cloud and Tumble Books for sure are simultaneous use to give your students access to the same book at the same time. It doesn't matter how many of them are logged in. You have 100 kids logged on to the same book. It's totally fine. It's not like Libby and Hoopla where there's only so many books to be checked out. This is all simultaneous access on Team Book Cloud and Tumblebooks. So it's great. And if you don't know about Scholastic Teachables, it's worksheets and things like that. So give it a look. If your public library probably has a subscription to it, it's very helpful. Or if you're interested in it, just let them know, because they might have considered it and they've been like, maybe not. It might not be worth the money. But if you know that your teachers will be into it, it might be worth the money for them. And collection access. Your public library probably, not always, but probably has a bigger space to keep a collection. And also their funding, usually public libraries have more funding than school libraries do, but not always. But in the cases where they do, it's a lot easier for them to keep their collections up to date. And you and your public librarian can intentionally purchase different books from each other. If you're questioning whether or not to purchase a book, but you know your public library is going to have it, and you set up this great system of your students being able to borrow from both, then you don't have to necessarily worry about buying that book, and you can focus your money in a different direction. And technology. We can give them access to poster printing, 3D printing, laminating, Cricut, all of these things that might be useful in the classroom. At the Kaimai County Library, we would have teachers printing posters, and we would have posters up in the library. They'd be like, that is great. Can I have a copy? Or can you send me the file for that? And I get printed. And, secretly we would just print it for them and give it to them without them having to pay for it. But poster printing is a very helpful thing. And the laminating can also be incredibly helpful, especially if you have a public library that has one of the giant laminators and your school doesn't have a giant laminator. Giant laminators are amazing. Also, your public library probably has different softwares that maybe your school is considering, or different teachers are considering, and they'll have the VR and drones and stuff for you to be able to play with and see maybe if it'll fit into your curriculum or anything like that. And the MiFis are the mobile hotspots, and usually you can check them out for a week, and it's very helpful. Like if you're going to be on a field trip but you need internet access, then that'll be great. Now, for your students, we have so much for your students. Your students are the purpose of our existence in the Youth Services Department. I mean, there's also homeschool students and everything like that, but your students are going to be the bulk of the reason that we are there. And for them, we have events. They're free. They're always free. If your public library is charging for any kid or teen events, then it's very rare. And if you have your calendars in the library, then that can be a great way for them to find out that we have all these free events for them. Technology for school or recreation. And this is how a lot of your students are going to actually get access to expensive technology. And they have access in the school, but we're going to have different stuff at the library, and they're going to always have access to it. They don't necessarily have to be going to a specific school or anything like that. We have students who come in and they do video editing, and they learn they throw the videos up on TikTok and everything, but they learn all these different things and they get to use it for fun, and then sometimes it even is useful in school. And it's a collaborative workspace for them to do schoolwork and for them to just do recreational stuff. Sometimes some libraries have Dungeons and Dragons groups for the teens and then also for adults, and it's great. It's a great place, a great neutral place for them to get together with people. We're, as you I'm sure know, we are a lifelong resource for your students. We'll be with them throughout their entire lives. No matter where they move, there should be a public library for them to use. And if they stay in the area, then they can even continue using the same public library. And we're in session when the school is not. Most libraries are only closed for the big 5 holidays of the year. They're even open on Sundays, most libraries. And then we're open till 8 o'clock, Monday through Friday at most libraries. So we're open so much, and your students have access to us all year round. And it's great that they have their school library, and it's very important that they have their school library, but we will be there all the time for them to be able to use. And we'll be with them as they transition their schools, go to college, enter the adult world, all of that, especially in the young adult years when things can be very tumultuous and weird. We can be a solid place that helps them carry over into that time period of their life. And we're an ever-present safe space for them, and a third space for them. And it's very important to have that throughout your life. And we are free. We have no cost to use the library, especially if your library is fine free. But just walking in the door is totally free. You can hang out there all day, and it's totally free. There's very few places like that. And their time with us is unstructured. They're free to do whatever they want. And they're free from how they are known at school and home. I've seen a lot of teens, or I teach marching band in the same district, and I see how they are with their school friends, and then I see how they are with the people that they met and hang out with at the library. And it's going to be totally different than how they are with their parents. It's a new place for them, or maybe not new, but it's a separate place for them where they don't have all of these responsibilities all of the time. And a lot of times it helps them experience a freedom and deciding and working out who they are. Now, what can we do for the school librarians? The most important part. We can be your compatriot in library issues. We are your biggest advocate. We understand what a big deal you are and how important you are. We are a member of the community who can tell the world how big and important you are. We can send your administration information about the great work that you've done. You could ask your public librarian that you've been working with to send a letter to your administration about all the different things that you've done and how great you've been. And I'll probably say this again later, but then if like a book challenge comes up, or you have a budget cuts coming up or something, then they'll have that whole file of how you have been doing all these great things throughout all of the years. So no matter what other people say, there is this backlog of goodness about you in there. And you'll also have somebody to bounce ideas off of and share ideas with and everything. School librarians are usually so alone, and everybody's kind of alone in the school because you got to be in your classrooms, but school librarians are usually more cut off from everybody else. And it's really important to have a great connection with your school people, but it's also really important for you to have that connection with other librarians who can help you out, and just know the things that you know and have the point of view that you have. And of course, we can share resources together, the database, the collection, all of that great stuff. And you can show your school that you're a liaison. You're connecting your students with the outside world in, the appropriate technology or school ways, learning ways. And you'll have a partner in the community, someone who is outside your school that you bring in routinely, kind of like the last thing I said. And we can connect you with other community partners, especially if you have a very large school district. There's going to be smaller libraries probably in your area, or even just generally close to your area, that they really know all these different community groups and all of that, and they can help partner you with them at the appropriate times. And we're part of your extended team for inquiry learning. Even if your school doesn't do inquiry learning, it's still the same principle. You can bring us in for projects. You can bring us in to teach the students how to do different things. Take a little bit of the load off of you, take a little bit of the load off of the teachers, and that way we can be making that connection with the students, which is so important for us. And we're helping out all of you. Now, what can you do for your public library? You can connect them to school information. We have no idea what's going on at the school, and that's how it's supposed to be. Other people aren't, the public isn't supposed to really know about the intricate workings of the school. Help your public librarian know the structure of your school. Every school is different, and especially if they're working with a whole bunch of schools, it's going to be really hard to keep track of. And don't assume that they're going to remember the details of what's going on. Just throw in the information over and over again, and maybe they'll be like, okay, I know, but it's better to tell them multiple times than to not tell them enough. And help them connect with shared students. This is such a big, important thing. We don't see, at the public library, we don't see 90% of your students. We don't see 90% of the public that we could be serving and we want to be serving. And that's really generalized. Of course, there are some libraries that they see almost everybody somehow. But most libraries, it feels like we have so much trouble getting them to come to us. They're getting brought to you, but we can't really bust them into the public library, sadly. So if you can help connect us with the students that we share, that is such a huge boon. Somebody at the presentation asked, I feel like I can't offer enough to the public library. And literally just helping us connect to the students and give them the information about what we offer to them and encourage them to come to us, that is such a huge, wonderful thing for us. And you can be an advocate for the public library within the school to the students as well as to the teachers and the administrators. There are so many high-level people in schools that just never touch the public library and have zero knowledge of what's going on there, and it's such an important part of that community. Share library updates and newsletters with all of your coworkers, and remind others when the library could be a resource. If you're at a staff meeting and they're like, oh, we could do this and this and this, and you're like, hey, yeah, well, the public library could totally help us out with that. Even you just saying that sentence at that meeting is incredibly helpful to us. And connect them to school staff. introduce them to teachers and administration, like physically introduce them, invite them to something where you can actually put them in these people's faces and introduce them. Or when they come to visit the school, be like, hey, can I pop in and introduce the school librarian to you? That type of thing. And schedule the classes they will visit and that will visit them. If like a teacher is specifically asking a librarian, like connecting with a librarian to set up a visit, you obviously don't have to be involved in that. But if there's going to be like if the school librarian, or sorry, if the public librarian is going to be coming to the school and to meet the entirety of the second grade, then they're going to really need your help with getting all of that organized. They don't know the school schedule. They don't really know what's going on. Like they don't know when lunches are, they don't necessarily know when half days are and everything. Like if you can work with the teachers that you see routinely to set that up, that's going to be very helpful. And discuss the best options. There's large assemblies, small assemblies, individual classes, like each has their pluses and their minuses. Just kind of weigh what would be best. And let me tell you a little story about the individual classes. There was, before COVID, I would go to a school and I would see sometimes small assemblies, usually large assemblies, to talk about summer reading, and to just like come in and vibe in the winter months too, and like interact with the kids. And because of COVID, we weren't allowed to get all the students together in such a large group, so I was going class to class. So we scheduled me to visit 2 classes each day of the week for like 4 days. And it ended up being absolutely amazing. Doing just 2 a day made it so I wasn't completely exhausted, and it was great. And then I could just go right back to the library because it was right down the street. It wasn't even all that long to go. And I got to really connect with those students and answer questions, and I got to do lots of dramatic readings, which are my favorite thing. Whenever I would do school visits, it would be information, dramatic reading, information, dramatic reading. And every single class chose for me to read Creepy Pair of Underwear. I had a whole bunch of books lined up, and they always chose Creepy Pair of Underwear as one of their books to read, which was fantastic. And they all enjoyed it. And then by the second day, when I was walking down the hallway, kids were like, oh, it's the librarian, come in here. Like, I have never felt like so well known and like famous in my life. Those kids wanted me to come in because they'd heard about me. Well, they heard me doing it because I was very loud. They heard about all the funny stories that I read and all of that, and they were super excited for the visit. So it worked out wonderfully. One of the ways that COVID changed things, and it worked out for the better. Sorry, let's continue with the presentation. And like I said, the individual teachers can schedule directly with the public library, but the big visits are going to be really hard to schedule for us. And also just be open to changing what didn't work. Like you have your meetings after projects and everything with the teachers to see what did and didn't work. Do that with the public librarian too. And when meeting with teachers, bring your knowledge of what the public library offers and help connect them to what they need. That's kind of like what I said before. Like when you're talking to teachers, anytime the public library could possibly be helpful, please just mention it because you're there and they're not going to know that we're there unless you tell them probably. And invite your public librarian to school events. And I'm going to talk about that more later, so we won't go into that right now. Invite your public librarian to staff meetings. Preferably ones where they could talk and be an active part of what's going on, maybe give a little bit of a presentation. It doesn't have to be super long. It could literally just be, hi, I'm blah, blah. I'm from the blah, blah library. I can do this and this and this. Or they could do like a legit presentation, or they can do a training, whatever. Share information, let the teachers know who they are, and let the teachers know how to connect with them. A lot of these teachers are not going to the public library. Or even if they are, they're not talking to the youth services librarians, or maybe they're going to a different branch that isn't necessarily where the outreach person is or something like that. Not all libraries have somebody specifically doing outreach, obviously. But usually there's one point person if there is more than one person in the department at all. Also, advertising and book lists. If you have public library advertising and book lists in your library, that's a way for your students to remember that we exist. And so you can have our event calendars and also big event flyers, not necessarily all the flyers, but like if there's a big one that you think your students are going to be into, you can put that out. And book lists. I mean, the book lists will make it so that you don't have to keep creating book lists. It'll be for what most likely is a larger collection. And then also, it is frustrating because maybe you don't have those books on the shelves, but if you get your students' library cards through the library card drives that we're going to talk about, then you can help those students put the books on hold, and then we'll talk about getting books to your library. And also, if possible, if you send, usually lots of schools do it, especially in the primary schools, where kids get a folder sent home, and if you can just slip a library calendar in there once a month, then that would also be very helpful, because then their adults at home will know that there is definitely something going on at the library, and maybe there'll be an event they didn't know about that they'll be super into. Also, teach your students about the public library. You're already teaching them about the school library, of course, but they might not understand that the public library is a little bit different. Like they can make noise at the public library, and help them understand the public library isn't a monster. Not saying that the school library is a monster, but these kids' parents were probably growing up in the 2000s and 90s and everything. I know, it kind of hurts, but their parents grew up in a time when libraries were a lot stricter and didn't feel as welcoming as they are now. So help them know that the public library is very welcoming and wants them there, and probably doesn't even have fines anymore. In New Jersey, you can go into any public library without a library card, just use the computers. You just go to the desk and ask for a computer pass, and you can hop right on. And talk about fines. Hopefully your library is fine free. We'll talk about that later. Book returns, how to use the e-library, all of that stuff. Talk about the events, especially if you know that your students are super into something that's coming up. Encourage students to connect with their public librarian, which, I mean, if they get to connect with them at school, all the better. But if you're like, oh my goodness, you like manga, so does the public librarian, blah blah, then that'll help them connect with them a little bit and maybe feel more excited to go to the public library. And maybe the first time that your students have ever been there. I grew up 10-15 minutes down the road from 2 different libraries, and I went there a total of like 2 times in my childhood. And I looked for unicorn books, and I didn't find any, and I just left, and I didn't like it. So if my school had brought me there and I'd actually learned a little bit about how to use the library, it probably would have been very helpful. But a lot of your students may not go to the library at all. It's hard to get places. All right, now partnering with your public library. Here's a bunch of different things that we did at the Cape May County Library and at different libraries that I've worked at, and also that I have talked to friends about. So library visits at school and at the library. The kids come to us, to the public library, the students come to the public library, and the public librarians come to your school. Fall, winter, spring, don't think that there's ever a bad time of year for it. And you know what, these weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas, maybe this would be a great time for a visit to the public library while the kids' brains are like out in space. And having somebody come in, even if it's just to talk about summer reading, to help your students know about it and hopefully do summer reading. The public library puts a lot of work into summer reading, and it's always a bummer when not a lot of people do it. And the more students that do it, the better, because we all know the summer slide is horrible. All right, bookmobiles. See if you can get a bookmobile stop at your school if your public library has a bookmobile. But if they do, then that is a great way for them to be able to just go on and browse some books and check them out. They would need to have a library card, but they can check stuff out, and then also they could make it so that when they put holds on items, it gets put onto the bookmobile and brought there, and they check it out. Or if they don't have a bookmobile, you can get maybe get a routine delivery or pickup maybe. At the conference presentation, somebody was saying that their municipal department would do deliveries around the schools, and it was amazing. And it might not, maybe it would be once a day, maybe it would be once a week, probably more like once a week or every 2 weeks even. But a routine delivery would be amazing, and it could be somebody from the school doing it or someone from the public library doing it. They might even be delivering between their branches already, so if they kind of intersperse schools into their deliveries, then all the better. And then also dropping off the books. If the kids can drop public library books off at your library and then those books make it to the public library, then that will make everything so much easier for them, because they can't, like we said, always get to the public library, but they are getting to school, thank goodness. And you can also possibly get a rotating collection, which is literally just a shelf of books from the public library that gets moved to your library for your students to check out. And when we were at the conference, one librarian was talking about how she just puts them in the system. She uses the public library barcode. It's easy to find them. She puts on a special label on the spine, and the students check them out like normal books. And sadly, she has to do a thing where she puts them on her card, but she's from Cape May County, and the Cape May County Library is free. So at least she's not getting any fines for them being late or anything. But if you can get an institutional card from your public library, then even better. Or if they're setting it up in their system as your location, then all the better for that. And then rotate. They can rotate the shelves every month, marking period, half year, whatever works for you guys. They're probably going to have, like, every time a popular book comes out, they're probably buying multiple copies of it, and then after a while they don't need multiple copies anymore. So those extra copies, instead of being deleted, can go into the special shelf that will end up at whatever school. And then, other books that's like, well, this book isn't really circling here, but maybe it would circ at the school library, that type of thing. And also, make sure that there's a way for the public library to get the statistics of what's getting checked out. Hopefully. I mean, if it's not a deal breaker, if that doesn't work, but it's very helpful to the public library if they know. We kind of talked about this with the bookmobile. Book delivery and drop off. Student holds at the public library being brought to your library. And students returning the books from the public library to your library and then getting back to the public library. And deliveries being done either by the public library or a school staff member or a mix or whatever works out. Preferably it would be the public library doing it because they have a more flex schedule and there's probably some delivery system already happening. And if you're having trouble organizing this with your public librarian, consider making a branch for the school. And they can set it up so that people don't necessarily see it unless they're in certain situations or something like that in their catalog system. But usually making a special branch for the school so that when that book goes on hold, they know that it goes to the school instead of just sitting on the hold shelf at that library. And story walks. They could be created by the public librarian or by you. You guys could do this even without the public libraries. But they might be working on story walks anyway. But it would be a great way for them to advertise not on school grounds, you know what I mean. But it'd be a great way for them to advertise to the students that they exist. So the public library creates the story walks. There's a folder on the Google Drive folder about story walks. And if you have any questions about it, please feel free to email me. And I will gladly walk you through it. I made a little how to do it, like tearing apart the books and laminating them and everything, but it might be a little bit confusing when you're not like doing it. So please feel free to message me if you want to know how to make them. Just know that you have to purchase 2 copies of the book and they can't be donated. But anyway, sorry. So if the public library can create a story walk and then post it at the school, and then a school staff member just like keeps an eye on it to let them know if something happened to it, or like they have a few zip ties or whatever in case like one breaks, that type of thing, then that's super helpful. And then your students can use it anytime during the school day or even after. Like if you have a chain link fence in the field where they do their running around for gym class, then awesome. Like the student could go out there for a brain break and read the book together and then come back in. They could use it at any time, even when the school is closed. If they're allowed in the fields, they could even be using it. So there's lots of different applications for it and different ways to do it. And reusable learning objects. You can see if your public librarian can make instructional videos that could be plugged into your classes and your teachers' classes. So they could post it on their YouTube for all of their patrons to see. So it's still like perfectly useful for them. And then they're getting stats from the schools also showing it. And it could be about ebooks, databases, literally just like how to check out from the library, but showing it actually happening in the library. Whatever might be useful, let them know. Maybe they'll be able to do it. They might not have the time, but if they know that people are interested in it, then it's something that maybe they can prioritize a little bit. And then they can keep the videos updated. You just plug them into your classes. And also consider any routinely made videos like book talks. Like the Cape May County Library, we had a couple teen librarians who were really great at doing Teen Book Tuesday every Tuesday. And there were teachers who would always log in either on Tuesday or Wednesday and show it. And it was a few moments that they could have a brain break and their students were getting to know all of these great books. And library card drives. There was a folder about library card drives in Google Drive. And it's the forms we use, a walkthrough of what happens. I even have like the little sheets of paper that I would print out and everything for it. So all the stuff's there. Feel free to email me if you want me to like walk you through what it is. But the students, adults, fill out a form. It used to always be a paper form, and then during COVID, we made a Google form for it. And maybe your public library will have to do it through their website, whatever the rules are for them. But us doing it on a Google form made it a lot simpler. And then we would delete their information after we made the card, so we didn't have the information hanging around. But then the public library makes the cards. The public library makes the form, and the public library makes the cards. You're connecting the students to the link for it or giving them the piece of paper to take home to fill out. And then the cards get delivered to the schools for dissemination. I would literally just drop off a baggie at the schools. Each each homeroom had its own little wrap of cards, and the students' names were on the back. And just know your public library cannot give you your students' card numbers. It is a breach of privacy if they give it out to anybody other than that kid. So you can't just call and say, hey, I need this kid's card number. It's not going to work out. They should not give it to you. But hopefully when they get the cards, they can record them somewhere, like on their library folder or something like that, so that they will have it throughout the whole school year. And it doesn't matter if they lose the card. And after school programs. It is a great, great thing if your public library can be involved in your after school programs and invite them to come to the school, whether it's once a week, once a month, something. They can just be interacting with those kids. We work till 5 in most cases, sometimes until 8 or 9 p.m. So it's not a big deal for us to be around after school hours. And then the after school programs can also make field trips to the public library. Of course, this is going to be contingent on a lot of things, but remember that it is a possibility. And the public library likely can't do special events just for your group coming to the library because there's going to be a lot going on, especially if you're coming every week or something like that. But if they know you're coming, then they can just prepare for them to be at an event that's open to the public. Like if they do crafts one Tuesday a month, and you tell them, hey, we'd like to come to that craft on Tuesday, then they can hopefully prepare more items. And depending on how many students you're bringing, they might not be able to do that many items. But just talk to them and always let them know if you're considering bringing your group to a program, because they are definitely going to need to be able to prep. And if they usually get 5 kids at a program and suddenly they have 30, it's going to be a serious problem. All right, book clubs. Your public librarian might be able to help you get extra copies of your books. When I was a teen librarian up in Old Bridge in LMXAC, all the teen librarians had an agreement that if a book was more than 2 years old, then it was okay for us to pull all the copies of it so that our schools could do book clubs, or even we could do book clubs. And so we just had the books for an extra amount of time, probably 2 months. And then it was kind of hard to get a copy of that book for a little bit, but also at the same time, everybody's getting a circulation for that book, and it's going to be a good book because we chose it for book club. And then they're going to, of course, be getting it back, and it's only a little bit of extra time. And your public librarian might even be interested in helping run a book club. Book clubs can be rough, so it's nice to have somebody else there to bounce ideas off of and be, the collaborative partner, bringing up ideas. And lunch bunches and tabling. Your public librarian has a lot more of a flexible schedule, typically. So they might be able to just come in for a lunch, maybe once a week, every other week, once a month, something. Invite them. They could do book talks, crafts, hangout time, whether the students are eating in the library or if it's a special table in the lunchroom. And also the tabling during lunch. It's literally, there's a table set aside and they're literally just sitting there. They have whatever they're doing, whether it's that they brought a snack with them or they're doing some kind of prize wheel or whatever it is that they're doing, and they have their flyers and everything. And students can just come up to them. And it's super low impact for you. It's just making sure that they have a table and everything. And then hopefully more students will be interested in the library. Now, summer feeding. It can be really hard to set up summer feeding, but it has a really amazing impact on the community. As you know, a lot of the kids don't have any food don't have good access to food during the summer months. So the Cape May County Library was able to set up summer feeding at one of our libraries. It was super beneficial to the kids. Some of your school staff might be interested in helping in the summer, especially maybe your lunch aides, that type of thing. It can fit in with what the school's already offering over the summer, possibly. And meals can be in the school or in the library or whatever works well. And so hard to set up if there is a school partner, then it can help a whole lot. And also, even if you can't really be a partner, the public library is going to need advertising. So what we ended up doing was I printed a bajillion flyers for it, and they were quarter-page flyers, so we cut up a piece of paper so it wasn't as much paper, and then also they're much more likely to keep a quarter-page flyer than a full flyer. And then I put them into bundles of 25, and I gave them, I called the schools and asked how many homerooms they had, and they told me, and I was able to just drop that many packets off at the schools, and each kid got their flyer about it, so every single kid knew that it was happening, and we had a nice big turnout. There's also grants. Grants are, of course, monstrous to apply for. So anytime you can have a partner in applying for a grant, it's always super helpful. And partnerships are always more likely to receive funding. So as you're thinking of grants, consider your public library and remind your public library that you can also possibly be a partner for grants. And big co-sponsored events. I was so excited to do a Touch a Truck event with one of the schools, and then COVID numbers started rising and we had to cancel it, and I was super bummed. But having a partner when you're doing a large event is super helpful. And when it's from the public library and the public school, you get full buy-in from the public usually. And the vendors and community partners that you invite are much more likely to be involved, and you can pool your resources together. Just having a partner in planning things makes it so much easier. And your public librarian is planning large events all the time. The events that they're planning are very different from the classes that you're doing constantly. And I'm sure you've done plenty of large events, but your public librarian is probably doing a large event every month and then moderately large events like at least every week. So it's very second nature to them. So having them as a partner will be beneficial. And virtual author visits during school hours. This is one of the things that during COVID actually became very helpful. Before COVID, we would do author visits after school. Sometimes they would be in person, sometimes they would be online. There would be like maybe 10 people there tops. It was usually parents who wanted their kids to be into it, even if they weren't. And then every now and then, some kids that actually were into it, but it just wasn't as popular as we would hope. And the bigger authors are really expensive, and all authors in general are really expensive, pretty expensive. And if you have an author driving to where you are for hours, and like maybe you're putting them up in a hotel and all that stuff, it's a real bummer when very few people come. So if you we started during COVID, we started doing school visits during school or library author visits during school hours. So the homeschoolers were logging on, which was awesome. And then also the teachers would log in. We'd have like 20 or so teachers logged in, and then literally hundreds of students were participating, which was amazing. So it was definitely worth the expense. We got our nice big audience for our event, and then the teachers also got a great event that they could plan a unit around. And I think one school even, they had the kids come to the library, and they all participated in the event with the librarian and the class aides, but then the teachers went and had a meeting or something like that during it, which was lovely. And set up some routines with your public library. Card drives in the fall, maybe with just certain grades, and then a public library visit in the fall so that they can use those library cards and get practice using the library. And then every winter, invite a public librarian to come visit for fun. This obviously isn't routines that you have to do. This is just a recommendation. But coming to visit and just do a little bit of library information and have a fun time. Do some dramatic readings, which everybody loves dramatic readings. Well, almost everybody loves dramatic readings. And then at the end of every year, have them come and talk about summer reading, and it becomes a routine part of your students' lives. Having routines that you are constantly doing will make it so that you don't forget to do the things, and you can be reminding each other. And then you can, of course, still have the public librarians coming in to, help with projects and things like that. But this way, even if you're busy, it's more likely that they'll happen. And ask your public librarian if they'll make videos if visits aren't possible. They might not have the time, but if they know people are interested, then they might be able to consider it for the future. And offer to help them if you can. Maybe consider making joint videos. And they aren't always as good as coming in to visit, but maybe sometimes they're even more useful because the teachers don't have to feel stressed out about when to play the video. And I have an example of a summer reading video that I did there at the bottom. It doesn't need to be as involved as that video was. I had a lot of fun with that video. But it could literally just be, hey, I'm this person. Here's what summer reading is. Goodbye. But I really enjoyed that video. It's definitely, I feel, worth watching. And story times. We at the Canton County Library, one of our branches is attached to one of the schools. It's a pre-K through 8th grade school. So they would bring their pre-K classes over for our story time. It was a public story time. Anybody could come to it, but they would always bring the pre-K kids over. And it wasn't considered a field trip because it was on school property, because the library was technically owned by the school. And that meant that every single student of that school had experienced these amazing hardcore story times. And of course, I got to do those story times, so I absolutely loved it. But they all got to experience that. They were all getting early literacy. The teachers had tons of fun while we were doing it. The teachers would stay, of course. They wouldn't just drop off like 30 pre-K kids. But the teachers and the class aides would stay and help, and they infused some of the stuff from the story times into their everyday school day, and it was wonderful. And I loved it, and the students loved it, and the teachers loved it. And it gave the teachers a brain break, which was amazing. And we also, at our technical school, our technical school would bring student parents to attend public library story times. So there were story times that were already scheduled, just like with the pre-K. The public was invited to them, obviously. And so the technical school would take their student parents. It was always mothers, sadly. We kept hoping that they could include the fathers too, but they had like a parenting class that they would be in during part of the day. So during that time, they would bring the parents over on a bus. It was a field trip, a weekly field trip type of thing. And then the beginning of the year, those student parents weren't super into it. The babies weren't super into it. But by the end of the year, like, they were getting all this early literacy training. They knew the songs. They were doing stories, all of that stuff. It was beautiful and amazing. And just make sure if you're hoping to do any of this, communicate with your public librarian, because suddenly having more people than anticipated might be pretty confusing. And like, they might know, like, I'm gonna have 10 people for story time, and then if suddenly there's 40, they will not possibly have it set up for that. So just communicate. All right, now summer reading. Not a lot, lots of schools aren't doing summer reading anymore, which is, fine, but summer slide is still a horrible thing. So consider combining summer reading efforts with your public library. So the public library puts tons of money, tons of time and effort into their summer reading program, and they would love to have all the more participation. So if you tell your students, hey, do the public library summer reading program, and you'll get credit when you come back to school, then that will help everything. And encourage the public library to have online and physical logging, because I have lots of people tell me everybody has a cell phone. Well, not everybody has a cell phone. Not everybody has internet access. And for a lot of kids, just having a piece of paper to be logging, they can handle that themselves. They don't need help from other people. And yes, it might get lost. But if the public library can have both, then it's great. And consider how you're going to have the students show you that they did summer reading. Talk to the public library about it. The public library is not going to be able to give you a list of who did summer reading because it's a privacy problem. But maybe even just have the kids say yes or no whether they did summer reading. Maybe it doesn't have to be as hardcore as having physical evidence. And this way, it'll help save lots of kids from the summer slide, or at least lessen it. All right, what to communicate with your library partner, public library partner. What to communicate? School projects. If your students are going to be doing a project and there is any possibility that they are going to be using the public library for it, but especially if they are going to be told to use the public library for it, please tell the public library and let them know. Are they going to be using databases, books? What else? What are the requirements involved? Do the books have to be 100 pages? Will students need to be printing things? What could staff need to do to guide confused students? Just an email anytime a teacher is encouraging their students to visit the library will make everything so much easier for the library staff. Immensely. And you know what? Maybe your students are going to be coming in when the youth services librarian is not working. At least the circ staff could be prepared for it. And is this part of the curriculum? Is it going to come up every year? Should they be considering it for their collection development? Let them know. And is the public library going to actually be able to meet the needs of your student? Now, I have this little leaf icon here. I didn't get to talk about this at the actual conference, but you get to hear the story now. When I was in high school, every biology class would have to do the leaf project. And it was talked about. Everybody knew it was coming. Everybody's siblings had done it in the past. And it was a big deal. It was a huge part of your grade. So the leaf project was you were supposed to go around Cape May County and find all of these leaves. They gave you a list of leaves and they told you you had to go find them around the county. And as somebody who did not have a car in their family, it was not very easy to do. And there was no way to know what these leaves even looked like. They told you to go to the public library and take out a book about leaves. And guess what? When I did finally get to the public library, there were no more books because they had like 5 books. And they had 5 books specifically because of this project. But 5 kids out of like 150 in these classes that were handling it at the same time. Like it obviously didn't spread around, and people would check the books out and then keep them for the entire duration of the project. And this was before there were no fines, but people just accepted the fines. So I had no idea how to figure out what these leaves even looked like. I knew I had like 3 or 4 leaves in my yard that I could get, but I had no way to go get those leaves. And I did check my CD-ROM encyclopedia, but there were only a couple of leaves in it, and I already knew what those leaves were, so it was not helpful. They did have the option of being able to draw the leaves instead, but they really wanted you to go find those leaves. And it was just completely impossible. And how could I draw the leaves if I didn't know what they looked like because I didn't get a leaf book? And there have never really been bookstores down in Cape May County, and how was I supposed to be able to, I couldn't even go buy a book, and this was in the late 90s, so I wasn't going to be able to pop online and buy a book about leaves. So it was a complete nightmare. And the library was just not able to meet the student needs. And of course, this would be a totally different project now. I don't know if they still do it or not, but it was just not working out. And communication with the public library might have been able to help them figure out at least that they needed to not do it with every class at the same time. So just consider talking to your public librarian when you're doing big projects like this. Or any project that's going to involve the library being needed, because I hated the library after that for not being able to help me out the one time that I really needed them. And like I said before, I didn't really use the public library growing up, and that really informed my life as a public librarian now. And it's worked out okay, but it wasn't great at the time. All right, school events. Invite your public librarians to your school events, please, and please give them as much time as possible to prepare. They are most likely, like most public libraries, set their events 2 months ahead of time. So that means on December 1st, there is the December calendar out and the January calendar is out. So that means all of those events are set in stone. And they want to be at your event, but they also want attendance at their own event. They don't want to set an event at the same time as yours and just not have anybody come to their own thing. And you're going to need to find coverage if your event is on their usual night shift. Like, I work every Tuesday night until 8 p.m. I can't necessarily just suddenly go over to the school that night because I'm the supervisor. And that's usually what happens. You serve as librarian is usually the supervisor for the building, and they can't just peace out for the evening without finding some kind of coverage. So the more warning they have, the better, and the more likely they'll be able to find coverage. And even if they can't always come, just keep inviting your public librarian anyway. Like, maybe it's just not working out, but you know what? Eventually it might work out. So just keep inviting them. And communicate your hopes and dreams with your public librarian. What do you want to be doing with your public librarian? And your public library and your public librarian. Even if you're unsure, just have a conversation and maybe it'll generate ideas between the both of you. And it doesn't hurt to think big. Maybe you can both be working toward a goal. Hopefully you'll be in your position a long time, and hopefully they'll be in their position a long time, and then you can both be working together toward these bigger goals. And communicate to them when you need help. Let them know when you have book challenges or collection impediments, or you just need an opinion or inspiration. Martha Friedman did her amazing presentation earlier today about her horrific ordeal with book challenges, and it just really drove home, having somebody else to be talking to about this, and maybe being a voice of reason, being a reminder that public libraries are a thing, and you're these people are out of line, or whatever's going on, having another person there is really helpful. And then also, your public librarian and you put together are 2 people with the resources to understand what to do in the case of book challenges. And it's really, when you're feeling down, you're feeling like everybody hates you, it's sometimes just nice to remember that somebody really does like you. And if you'd like them to send you a letter of send a letter of recommendation for you, do it. Just let them know. If they're sending in, it could be for a job or for a promotion or whatever, or for a raise, but also just at the end of every school year, ask them to send a letter to your administration saying, hey, your your school librarian is amazing. They did this and this and this, and we worked together on this and this and this. And then you'll have all these letters in your file. And then when something does come up, and somebody's trying to maybe get you fired, hopefully it never happens, but if somebody is trying to get you fired, then you'll have those letters in your file to fight against it. And just set up a meeting time. Betsy was at the presentation today, and she did the most amazing thing. Like, the person who worked in her school district before her, just like, they never responded to us. We never really had any communication with them. But and then we didn't know that they had left, and we never saw the job posting go up. And then suddenly Betsy contacted us and was like, "Hey, I'm the new librarian at the school district. Can we meet up?" And it was beautiful and amazing, and we had such a wonderful meeting. And she and the librarian at her local branch have worked together so wonderfully, and it's been amazing. And we wouldn't even have known to contact her. We always try to, at the beginning of every school year, go through the school websites and make sure that we have the right contact information, but the school website was not updated, so we would have kept sending the email to the wrong person and never gotten it to her. So it was amazing, and just contact them and let them know. And visit the public library. You can go over there, they can walk you through, give you a nice tour, and talk about what you guys want to be doing. And then also invite them to the school, introduce them to the administration, to the teachers, let them see what the students are seeing while they're there. And you can share information, ideas, hopes, and strategies. You'll get to know each other, and you'll feel more comfortable in your conversations. And if the first time you contact them is because there's a book challenge, then that's fine. But it's always a little nicer than when it's just to meet each other and get to know each other. And make a plan of one thing each school year that you both want all school staff to know. Tell them other things, but super focus on that one thing and consider all the possible publicity and information for that specific thing. And then that brainstorming can help you with how you share other information. And at the end of the year, ask yourselves if you accomplished your goal, and then you can put that into your evaluations and your reports and all of that. Additionally, just some more ideas and recommendations. If you run a library card every year, soon all your students are going to have library cards. And depending on how your public library runs the card drives, but most likely any student who can't find their card can just fill out the application again and get a nice replacement. And your public library might be fine free. If not, you can work together to make it happen. You can utilize the diversity and outreach section's Find Free toolkit. I know that all the librarians that were part of making that toolkit, they're listed at the end of it. They'd be happy to help you out, especially Jeff Cupo, and you can, of course, contact me if you want any help with it. And make it routine for students to have their card number recorded somewhere for when they're at school. Have them write it in a folder. If you're using Google Workspace, have them put it into like a keep note or something. Remember, the public library cannot give you your students' library card numbers because it is a privacy issue. And be a patron of your public library. Many towns give cards to public employees of that area, even if they don't live there. You may be in the same consortium or system as the library that your students are going to be using. And get to know the digital library your students can access, how to use Livy and Hoopla, and of course you know the benefit of having both the ebook and the e-audiobook for them to check out and use at the same time. And use your databases so you can point the teachers and students their way. And you don't have to buy the database, but they're getting the benefit from it. And the public library is already spending the money on it. Have them use it. And delve into digitized local history. Lots of libraries have lots of local history that your students can be using for projects. And sign up for email blasts and newsletters from the library. And ask your youth services librarian if maybe they can make like an educator-specific newsletter or email. The newsletters, like, and emails, they don't have to be like every day. They don't have to be every week. They could be like once a month, once a quarter, whatever. And follow your public library on social media. Just whatever you're already using. And you don't have to be like interacting with it. It's literally just, oh, I'm looking through my stuff, and you see the public library stuff on your feed and you're like, huh, now I know that, and you just go right past it. And remember, the public librarian is likely overwhelmed already with things that they have to do. Just like you, most youth services librarians are doing multiple jobs worth of work, but this is going to make their lives easier in the long run. And having the bigger numbers and the bigger interaction helps with funding. So don't walk in to demand that they give you things, of course. I don't think any of you would. But just approach it as, how can you work together? And if you can't get anything to work out with your youth services librarian, let their supervisor know. and of course approach it as being informational rather than being a narc. The library will give more weight to what they're being asked for, though. If you don't ask for it, probably not going to end, nothing's going to change. You're not going to end up getting it. Ask your youth services librarian what is blocking their ability to do outreach and present that to their supervisor, and probably let them know that you're going to talk to their supervisor. There are some situations where maybe that wouldn't be the best idea, but most of them it would. And keep it informal and informational rather than confrontational. And maybe they don't even realize how stressed their staff is. And we would hope that they would know, but sometimes administration is oblivious. And maybe their policies and staffing need to be altered to reflect their outreach intentions. And maybe they need to be altered to actually serve the public that they're supposed to be serving. And try having a gathering of professionals led by you or the public librarian, or preferably both. Include the administration, supervisors, library assistants, all of that from both sides. Everyone will be more on board with stuff if they feel connected to each other, and make it both fun and informative. And maybe you could do this as part of one of your staff development days. You invite the library people to come over. It doesn't have to be anything super heavy and hardcore. It's just everybody getting together and experiencing each other and getting your information. And consider making a This Is Us booklet with information and pictures of all school library staff in the district, as well as pertinent administration and team leaders and teachers and all of that. Your public librarian, even if you're like, oh yeah, the ELA teacher or this teacher or, you know, Mr. This and Mrs. That and all of that. Like they don't necessarily know their faces. Maybe those people are already coming to the library all the time. They don't even know that they are this teacher that is interacting with you constantly. And ask for the youth services librarian to do the same for you. Like maybe you go into the public library all the time, but you don't know who all the different people are. Like, it's nice to know. And all right, who to contact and how to get their information. Youth services librarian, children's librarian, teen librarian. Teen is usually like grades 6 through 12. It'll depend on the library. It's not technically teens, but it's like middle school and high school typically. The library director. Maybe if you can't find their information on the website, a lot of libraries have to lock it down so they don't get like tons and tons of spam. But just use the general email. Maybe they'll have a general email on the website or a form that you can fill out. You can also just call the circulation desk and say, hey, I'm the school librarian at this school, and who can I talk to? Who's the youth services librarian that I can talk to set up a school visit or something like that? And they will give you the information or give your information to them. And become a routine part of each other's lives. Whenever you visit the library, stop by and say hi. We can't be randomly visiting you, but we love to get visitors. So just swing by and be like, hello, I'm here. And then that can literally be all it is if you don't want to hang out and talk. And stuff to remember. Getting to know your public library will make things easier for you in the long run. And we can help you and your teachers meet your learning goals for your students. And we're all doing a lot, and we can all be helping each other out. And contact me if you have questions or want someone to bounce any ideas off of. And remember, you're doing great. You're doing so much stuff, and here you are trying to take on even more stuff, and you're trying to do so much for your students and for your teachers, and you're doing great. There is a comedy special on Netflix by Tom Papa where he says this over and over again. Every time I say it, I hear it in his voice. So just remember, you're doing great. And thank you. This is how I see myself in my soul. I am dressed up as a deer dancing at story time at the zoo. So whenever you think of me, please think of me like this, dressed up as a deer. My email is there, and just contact me if you have any questions or looking for ideas or just need someone to like bounce ideas off of, whatever. All right, thank you.